My name is Chris Wong. I'm Senior Developer Evangelist here at Mapbox. I'm joined today by Moritz Forster, who you should be able to see in his sharing video right now. Welcome to the next installment of our Getting Started webinar series. So we've done several episodes in the past on getting started with Mapbox GLJS. We've done Mapbox Studio, and now we're moving on to Android. So please go take a look at the rest of our series on YouTube and let us know also what other kinds of content you might want to see out of this series. So if you're not familiar with Mapbox, you probably are at least a little bit, but we do a lot more than just the Maps SDKs. So we also have robust search APIs, integrations for whatever platform you want to build in so that you can access these APIs quickly without a whole lot of code. We also power navigation and things like isochrones and optimization for full fleet vehicles and things like that. And then we also have robust data products. A lot of the data that makes it into our all the maps that you will use, you can also just kind of use on its own. So go take a look and see what the rest of our offerings are. And we do a lot more than just the map rendering. So I also want to give a quick call to action to join our Discord community. So the developer relations program here at Mapbox includes this Discord community where you can drop in and meet others who are working in the same platform as you, share what you're working on and maybe find someone to give you some help if you are caught on something. So by all means, please drop in there and say hello and let us know what you're working on. And then finally, here's our agenda for today. So I'm going to turn it over to Moritz here in just a second, but we're going to load a map. We're going to set the initial viewpoint, a lot of the same things we do for other platforms. We're just going to repeat in the Android environment. And last but not least, here's a slide to introduce Moritz. He's a solutions architect. So that means he works with customers and he's a specialist on the Android platform. So he's on LinkedIn if you want to follow him. And without further ado, I'll stop sharing, turn it over to Moritz, who's going to show us how to get started with the Maps SDK for Android. So take it away, Moritz.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you all for joining. The great intro. You saw the bullet points. These are the ones that we want to address today. So this is inspired by Patrick's session on iOS, getting started with iOS. We try to keep the parity between Android and iOS also in this webinar session. The SDKs are supposed to be on parity. There are some little things that are not on par, but most of the methods and functions of the SDKs are on parity. So let's take a look. One second, let me...
Moritz, really quickly, if I can say one more comment before we start. I'll be fielding questions, so if you have a question, just drop it in the chat. I'll kind of, I'll check things out, and then when I find a good moment to interject, I will come back on screen and ask the question. So I'll be kind of relaying everything. So if you have a question, just go ahead and ask it, and I'll try my best to get to everything. Thanks.
All right, great. So I assume you can see my screen now. Well, let me first, pick you up where the description of this webinar left you off. So this is a getting started series. So we're not going to get started from the very, from scratch. We expect you to be a bit prepared, and that means that you have Android Studio installed and that you already went through 2 sections of our getting started guide. This one here. It's the first section here of our Maps SDK for Android documentation, this installation section, and there are 2 sections that we require you to already have done in advance, so you can follow along here. The first thing is to configure credentials. This section here. In this section, you would sign up for a Mapbox account. That's free. Get a public access token and a secret access token. There's a difference between these 2 access tokens. The secret access token is the one with a scope, with the download read scope. This allows you to download the SDK libraries, and this secret access token should not be shared publicly. When you publish an app, you don't need to share the secret access token because you only need it when you build the application to download the library, and then you can compile it into your application. The public access token, however, is the one that is used for billing, and that needs to be distributed with the application. And that's the one that can be shared with the app. That's the difference between these two. And you can get these when you log into your account, your Mapbox account. Under the token section, you can request a secret access token and a public access token. So these are access tokens in case I'm going to talk about them. The second part is to add the dependency. That's pretty easy. It's just it's basically just one line, just this line here into your build.gradle file. So let's take a look in Android Studio and see how the dependency can be added. For that, over here. So adding the dependency can just be done in the module level build.gradle file, this one here. And from there on, we create a blank Android application, implement this dependency, and then we can run, or we can build the application, or build the Gradle, which will trigger the download of the SDK, and then we are ready to get started. So before we actually start coding, I'd like to show you what we want to achieve today. For that, I have a little demo here. So on the right-hand side, you see the emulator, and second, I'm going to run the application that we're building today. Okay, so that's basically it. Okay, these glitches here are related to the emulator. They don't happen on a real device. Doesn't look so great, but okay, these glitches are related to the emulator. And probably it was a bit choppy because of the screen presentation that I'm doing here. So that's basically what we were going to build. Okay, it was pretty short. Let's do it again. So what do we see here? First thing we see, we are loading a satellite map. And the camera position initially is located pointing onto New York. Then we are zooming out of the map and we're flying to a different location in Switzerland. And while flying out, we briefly see the 3D globe. Then we're zooming in again, and the target camera location is in Switzerland, and the camera is not pointing down anymore. The camera is pitched, and we see that the terrain is in 3D. It's not flat. What else do we see? There's a custom icon on the top of a mountain. So these are the things that we're gonna create today. Oh, sorry, I forgot two more things. We see that there's an atmosphere, and we also see that there's a sky layer. These are the things we're going to add to this application today. All right, so let's get started from the beginning. So first thing, and I'm going to do it like this. I'll always show the documentation, so where I'm taking the code snippets from before I copy them. So you can follow along and also repeat it later on, just with our documentation. All right, so first thing, we want to create a map. For that, we'll first start with defining the layout of the map. In our documentation, we already have the snippet here, the map view snippet, which already has some modifications in it. I'm just going to take it and explain the components of it later on. So let's take that one here, go to our Android Studio, and let's open up the layout file. So I started this project here with an empty activity. This empty activity came with the activity_main.xml and the main activity.kt. And here in the layout file, I deleted the text view that comes with it by default. And we're going to replace it by the map view. So we put the map view into this constrained layout. And now let's take a look at what properties this map view has that we can adjust. So here, this is the ID of the map view. It's just called map view. Then we can define the layout width and the layout height. We're just going to take the width and height of the parent, which is a constrained layout. And then these are interesting for us because we want to center the map on New York. And to center it on New York, we actually don't have to do anything because it's already centered on New York. And that's why I chose this location. So here we can set the target latitude. Here you can set the target longitude of the camera. And this is the target zoom level of the camera. Or actually the initial zoom level of the camera. Great. So this alone won't help too much because we also want to do something with the map in our logic. So this is here the layout. Let's jump over to the logic in the main activity. We don't need this thing here. So it's pretty blank. Only the standard onCreate lifecycle method is there. And I already created a map view, or I initialized the map view object. The map view object in onCreate, if we want to do something with the map view later on, we need to link it to the layout element. So let's do that. And I'm not using a view binding or data binding here, so we'd have to use the standard method to link it, the find view by ID method. All right, great. So yeah, that should already work. So if you run it, we should see a map. Let's take a look. Okay, great. So on the right-hand side here in the emulator, you see a map with the default map style, which is Mapbox Streets V8. It's centered on New York, and it's totally interactive. We can pan around, we can zoom in, and we can do all the map gestures that are available. We also see, go down to the C, so it's easier to see. We have the scale bar plugin up here. It's currently in, yeah, it's not metric. So it is in miles. This can be changed, adjusted. We're not going to do it today, but this is definitely possible. It's also possible to add more map ornaments like a compass and stuff, but we're not going to do that today. But this is definitely possible. Okay, let's jump back to the code. All right, now we have a map view. The next thing we would like to do is to use a different style, because you remember we yeah, our target application is using a satellite map style. So we could use, yeah, you could do two things. We could either use one of the standard map styles that Mapbox offers, or we could use our one of our custom map styles. Let me first show you how to use a standard map style. For that, let's take a look into our documentation. All right. So still under the same documentation, Maps SDK for Android, we just go down to map styles to set a style. So we have multiple styles available, even pre-built styles. The standard styles are the Mapbox streets, outdoors, satellite streets, light, dark, traffic day, traffic night. And to set such a style, we just need this line here. Mapbox map, load style your RI, and then the style URL. And the style URL is one of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different ones. All right, let's do it. All right, the Mapbox map is not known, so let's get it from the map view. We get Mapbox map, and now we can apply the load style URI to the map style that we want. And we want, let's just go for the satellite style. All right, let's try again. Okay, that worked. So now we have loaded a standard style. But the standard style by default, for example, does not support 3D. Therefore, we need to customize the style. And to do that, let's take a look at Mapbox Studio. I'm going to open that up. 1 second. And yeah, let's do it from scratch here. It's very fast. Let's create a new style in Mapbox Studio by just clicking on New Style. We can start with a template. Let's go with a satellite street style, and then let's just customize it. Okay, great. So the only thing we want to do here is we want to make this the style support 3D. Therefore, we need to just go here to this 3D button and click on 3D terrain and enable 3D terrain. That's already it. So we don't need to do much more. Let's maybe go somewhere where there's yeah, let's pitch the map a bit so we can see something 3-dimensional. And then let's see if there's something 3-dimensional. Oh yeah, here there's some hills. Okay, we see they are 3-dimensional. One thing to know about 3D terrain is that sometimes you want to show terrain even though it's pretty flat. And if that's the case, you can use this exaggeration. And exaggeration will just multiply. It's just a factor that the terrain elevation is multiplied by. And this will help you make terrain look more 3-dimensional. We can also set it to a higher value, like 3. But this is, yeah, it looks like Himalaya, but yeah, maybe let's stick to 1.5. This looks pretty good, I think. All right. So one more thing we need to do before we can take that style is we need to publish it. We've changed it, And now we want to publish it. We have to click on this button up here, publish, and this will then publish the style before, after. So before it was flat, afterwards it's not flat anymore. Yep, so that's the difference. I already have a style prepared, which is exactly the same. I call it a better nice style. I'm just gonna take that one. I don't need to publish a new style. But what you need to do to actually use that style, you have to click on that share button on the top right. And there you need to copy the style URL. This thing here. You can click on the blue button here to copy it. This will copy the URL that identifies this map style here, and it only can be used along with your access token. So only available for you. All right, so let's take that. Let's go back to Android Studio, and there, let's go to our strings.xml file, in which you also have put in your public access token under the parameter name Mapbox access token. Let's create a new one. Let's call it Mapbox_style URL and give it the value of your style URL. I mean, we don't have to do that. We could also just copy the string, but yeah, this looks cleaner. So let's do it. Let's copy over this parameter here and just paste it here for now. Yeah, that's one thing. So now we have the style URL. To enable 3D terrain, we need to add another source to our style. But this is where it becomes a bit more complex than just one line. But I'm going to walk you through that. So it's not really not a problem because it's all documented pretty well. Let's take a look at our documentation, how we can do that. So what we want to do now is we want to replace this line here and load our own style. And at the same time, at the time of loading the style, we want to add a few sources or add a few additional layers to it that would normally not be displayed. So let's take a look at the documentation. All right. Okay, yeah, that's what we need. So this is a different method also to load a style, and it allows us to add additional layers at load time of the style. And this all still is under the same documentation, Maps SDK for Android, under map styles and work with layers. So here, we're just going to take this complete load style function and replace, or let's just comment this one out here and put it in here in our own create method. Okay. So here we're loading a specific style again, like a standard style, a traffic day style. This is not a style we want to load. And also, we don't want to add the earthquake source, earthquake layer, sorry. And we also don't want to add the earthquake circle layer. So we can remove these, we don't need them. And then we also check again. Okay, 1 second here, please. I think I copied the wrong one. 1 second. Let me go back to the documentation and get the right one. Nope. Okay. All right. Let me just walk you through. What's going on here. So using the load style method, in addition to just loading our style defined in the Mapbox style URL, we also want to add 4 more layers: a terrain layer, a sky layer, an atmosphere layer, and we want to enable the globe view projection. And this can be done with the load style method. It cannot be done with the load style URI method. And this is why we're switching over to the load style method to do the same thing, to load a style. Here at load time, we can now add, let's first add the terrain layer. We just do plus terrain. So we do plus to the style, to the style extension implementation builder. We're adding the terrain. We give it the terrain layer. We give it a source ID terrain source, and we add the exaggeration of 1.5, the same thing that I showed before when we were looking at into Mapbox Studio. Second thing we need to do is, if we want a sky, we need to add the sky layer. We give it an ID, sky, and give it a type, atmosphere, and we can also set where the sun is located. This other addition, atmosphere, will add we call it a fog layer around the globe or on the surface, which will, it's basically just fog. So the things that are further away when you zoom in close to the ground will be harder to detect. And this projection layer here will allow us to, if we zoom out, will allow us to see a globe view of the world instead of the Mercator projection. All right, and there's one more thing we need to do after the style has been loaded. So this here is defining the layers. The style comes already with the sources for the sky layer, the atmosphere, and the projection, but it doesn't come with a digital elevation model. A digital elevation model is, so to say, it's a grid that is put on the map that will tell you what elevation, what geolocation has what elevation, and this is something we need to add at load time after the style has been loaded. And here we have the callback. This is the onStyle loaded callback lambda function. This will be triggered once the style has loaded, and there we can do stuff that require the style to be loaded. So we can use this it parameter here it's a style that has been loaded. So let's add the digital elevation model source to it. You just copy it over. Okay, and let me explain it here, what we're doing. So we're adding another source to our style. So it represents the style that has been loaded. We're adding a source, and we're adding the source called raster DM source with an ID terrain source. That's important that this ID here is the same as this one here, because the layer terrain will grab its data from the source with ID terrain source. And this is the one that we're defining down here. the data for that source resides in that URL, Mapbox terrain RGB. And the tile size for that is 512. So this will add the source after the style has been loaded. Okay, so this should now already give us 3D terrain. And this should work already. I can run that. 1 second. Oh, yeah. It's here. Okay. Unfortunately, my mouse doesn't allow me to do a pitching gesture, so let us change the pitch. Let's change the pitch, but let's do that in the next step. So the map still is working, so we didn't break it so far. It is 3D. I can promise that. You didn't see it yet, but we'll see it in the next step. So the next step is to fly from New York to Switzerland. So let's do that. All right. To fly to Switzerland with a camera, we will make use of the map camera. The map camera basically is the viewport that you see when you look at your map. And the position of the map camera defines what you see. So the center of it is the center point of the viewport. The bearing is the rotation of the map. So the standard bearing of 0 is the standard orientation where north is on top. The standard pitch of 0 is perpendicular to the surface. And then we have the zoom level, which defines on how far we're zoomed in. So in New York, we looked at from a zoom level 9, the highest, or not the highest, but the zoom level where you're out the most is zoom level 0. It will just give you a globe view. And the lowest zoom level is something like 21. Then it's also possible to add padding to the map camera, but we're not going to really need that today. All right, so let's use the camera options to build a build a destination point that we want to fly to. And once we have that, we will use the fly to function of the Mapbox map to fly from New York to the destination camera position. So let me again copy that over and then explain the components of the code. All right, first thing, we're going to create a new function outside of the onCreate, so not inside of this onCreate lifecycle function, but outside. Okay, I copied it over, but let me walk you through it. So our function is called fly to camera position. First thing we're doing here is we're defining the camera options that we just talked about. First, the center coordinate of the camera, we're just going to use the point.from long lat function, and we will add the longitude and the latitude of our destination location where the camera should be centered. So we're creating a point from long lat. This is our center. And then next up, we'll create the camera options. And to create the camera options, we will use the camera options builder function. And that builder function allows us to add a center, add the bearing, the pitch, the zoom. So I chose to use this bearing here, 130 degrees from north, because I wanted to give you a good look of the Eiger north face, because the center location of the camera is the summit of the Eiger, a famous mountain in Switzerland. And yeah, so we want to look at the north face. It's not really north, not completely north, but it's more or less north. So we cannot look at it from south. That's a problem. So we need to change the bearing of it. Then we also want to see the 3D terrain, and therefore I'm pitching the camera. And we want to zoom in a bit. So initially in New York, we're at zoom level 9. We want to zoom in a bit more to zoom level 13, just to get a closer look. And with that final parameter here, we tell the builder to actually build. From the camera options builder, it will create a camera options object. And this camera options object can be used as a destination for the fly to method of the Mapbox map. The fly to function takes 2 arguments. It takes the camera options at the destination location, and it also takes animation options. Animation options just tell us how the animation should look like. I didn't give it any, I only specified the duration because I didn't want it to just jump over, because it doesn't look good. So I changed the duration. Same way that we created the camera options, we create animation options. We create a map animation options builder, and the builder we tell to set the duration to 15,000 milliseconds. And then we tell the builder object to build, and this will build an animation options object. And now we have all the components we need. We can first get the Mapbox map from the map view object, map view object, and then we can use the fly to function and pass it the camera options, the destination, and the animation options, which just tell it to not do it in 1 second, but do it in 15 seconds. All right. So now we have this function. If we run it now, nothing will happen because we never call the function yet. So we want to call that function after the style is loaded. I'm going to copy that and go to the callback, to the style loaded callback, this one here, this lambda function here, and we'll just add it here after adding the source. And this will then trigger once the style is loaded. Okay, now let's take a look at that. Okay, now you see the globe view for a second. And now we're flying in to Eiger. Oh yeah, it took a while for the 3D terrain. I mean, this is due to the emulator. So the emulator, the rendering on the emulator doesn't work. At least there are sometimes some artifacts that some graphical glitches on the emulator that won't happen on a real device. So if you run that on a real device, it'll be very smooth. And yeah, there won't be any, or not these pretty obvious glitches, at least. There always can be some glitches sometimes, but they're very minimal, if at all. I mean, also what's important for the smoothness of, well, not really smoothness, but the smoothness of loading the map tiles is your internet connection. So if you have poor internet connection, then fly pretty fast, or animate the map camera very fast through the map. Yeah, it can always be the case that some map tiles are loaded slower and then just display black until map tile has been loaded. Okay, now we're almost there. So we have satellite map, we have 3D terrain, we have sky, and we have atmosphere. So the atmosphere is what you see here. So the mountains in the back, seem like they're in a fog, and this is the atmosphere layer. We have the globe view, and yeah, so what's missing is the marker. So we want to have a marker placed on the top, the summit of the Eiger mountain, which is this one here. Oh, now it's black, but this is a glitch that only happens on the emulator. So this won't happen. This won't happen on a physical device. Yeah, too bad. I actually wanted to tell you something about the Eiger north face, but now we can't see it anymore. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. All right, so let's add this marker. Okay, so markers. Yeah, when we talk about markers, I usually mean annotations. We used to have, or I think we still have, a deprecated method to add a marker to the map, but I think for the last major versions, there was an annotation plugin around, and now it's just called annotations in the recent version, or in the current version. So let's go to the documentation, Maps SDK for Android again, go to markers and annotations, and then click on annotations. And this is where it's explained how an annotation can be added to the map. And we will take a look at the default markers first. And this explains us how to add an annotation. So we have an annotation API that is handling these annotation objects. And it can handle multiple different annotations, not just marker like point annotations. It can also handle more complex objects, like circles. Okay, they're not more complex, but a polyline is more complex, or a polygon is also a bit more complex. And you can also add interactivity, but we're not going to do that today. We're just going to add a marker, a default marker, and a default marker with a Mapbox logo as an icon image. But you can choose your own bitmap or image you want to show there. So actually, this is the code we need. Just this thing here. We're gonna just copy it and create a new function. Let's just do it below our fly to camera position function. Also outside of the lifecycle method on create, or any other lifecycle method. I mean, I didn't add any other lifecycle method. I think we should do that, because this will, we should, we'll get to that later. Because we should make sure to handle the mapped object in case any other lifecycle method is called other than onCreate. But first thing first, we will add the marker. So let's create a new function. Let's call it add custom annotation. And in that function, we'll just add everything I just copied. Make it look a bit nicer. Okay. All right. So we need to import the annotations API. Also this function here. 1 second. Let me first import all of that stuff. Here we need to import the correct one. Let's not import the Android graphics point because this is not the point that we want. We want the Mapbox.geojson point. And then, yeah, here icon bitmap. Let's get to that later. All right, let's walk through all these functions here. So first, we define or we initialize the annotation API from the map view. That's important to initialize it from the map view, so it actually references this map view that we see and no other map view. Then we're creating the point annotation manager. The point annotation manager is required to or it's so to say it's a store for multiple of these annotation objects, and it can handle creation, deletion, and handling these annotation objects. So we'll create it and attach it to the map view again. And here in the point annotation options, this is so to say a builder object which accepts a couple of properties. One of the properties is the coordinates. Here we're going to put it onto the Eiger summit. So these coordinates are wrong. I looked them up for the Eiger, and let me copy them over. Or actually, we can copy them from our fly-to function because our fly-to function already has the Eiger in it. Yep. Just replace these two. Okay, this will place an annotation on the summit of Eiger, and the icon image will define which bitmap will be used as annotation. If we don't specify one, then it will be invisible and we won't see the annotation. Therefore, I already prepared a little bit here. So I created a Mapbox bitmap. Okay, it's not highest resolution. It's just 50 by 50 pixels. And I place it into the drawable folder here under resources, drawable, and this is where it's living. So let's just use that one. Okay, 1 second.
Hey Mo, quick check-in on time. We got about 10 minutes left, so just want to make sure you're tracking. But we should probably.
Yep, almost done
after this annotation. Thanks.
Yep, we're almost done here. So let's use the function getDrawable, which is a function that can get a drawable from our resources, and there we have to pass in the resource identifier r.drawable.mapbox, which is referencing this mapbox.bmp bitmap, and then we're converting that to a bitmap object, which we are passing to the with icon image property of the point annotation options. And that's it. We're taking that point annotations options, passing it to the create function of the point annotation manager, and this will create our point annotation and add it to the map view. And we have to also call that function, otherwise nothing will happen. And we can do that before we fly to, but we don't really, we won't see a difference. Okay, let's run it. And this should give us the same experience as, as I showed you in the beginning. Okay, that's nice glitch here again. But yeah, that's it. So thank you all for listening in. And over to you, Chris.
Sure. So I guess if there are any more questions, feel free to drop them in the chat while we're kind of wrapping up here, and I'll see if I can ask them. Mo, do you have any? I guess one question I just had was on, like, you said there was parity between these, iOS and Android, but a few little things. Has that always been the case? Can you just tell us more, like, some kind of general history of the Android SDK, maybe?
Yes, definitely. So these parity issues are in favor for the Android SDK. So Mapbox has been developing the Android Maps and Navigation SDK along with customers, and the Android SDK has been used heavily from some automakers. And there are some, especially in the navigation space, some functions that are not available on iOS that are available on Android. So it's the unparity is mostly in the navigation space, but it's pretty small.
Sure. Awesome. So it was great to see kind of the same analogs of, in the web world, there's markers, here there are annotations, but kind of you can do all the same things. And as I mentioned in the comments, if you make a style in Mapbox Studio, you can use it on all three platforms. And I think that's one of the big benefits that there's a lot tying all these things together, even if the coding environment and everything else is different. There's a lot of common threads, and you can use one style across many apps. So I'm not seeing any other questions. So I think with that, we'll wrap it up. So thank you again for joining us, and check this out on YouTube later. We'll probably get it published tomorrow. And if not, join in the developer Discord, and you can ask some follow-up questions there, and I'll see if I can connect you with whoever can find the answers. So thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you.